The extraterrestrial scouts landed on the outskirts of a tiny settlement concealed by there to them. Earth's cloaking shields were just an additional archaic planet in the galaxy records that are barely worthy of a second glance as they each looked around them. Aliens modified their visors so they could the ability to see beyond the visible spectrum and explore the world's finer features. They looked at the roadways surrounding them. Crammed with metal cars speeding by, all of them are powered by combustion engines. The air was heavy with the stench of oil and exhaust. To the aliens, the air appeared antiquated, even savage their own society. Had I outgrown these awkward, noisy machines that rely on quiet, self-sufficient crafts that followed logic orders? They couldn't contain their laughter. At the location, these people believed were recorded centuries after the first scout. Information that records the energy readings from his gadget beeped in the car as it examined the energy results, that wheel mechanics. With the process of internal combustion, he mumbled. Results amused me primitively. Further modifying his visor to fit his skin, their scanners proceeded to a couple buildings, stores and patrol stations along the road station's homes, each furnished with electrical cables that are tangled in walls. The buildings were simple, modest, and practical, lacking any of the sleek appearance or self-control mechanisms that the scouts seems to be accustomed to everything here. Ineffective and needing a surprise quantity of labor required by humans to maintain another scout laughed while observing a worker assiduously loading his vehicle with gas. Looking around like an animal that is bored, the aliens exchanged arrogant glances. As though they have been validated on Earth wasn't merely technologically lagging. It was totally reliant on antiquated techniques connected to fossil fuels and physical exertion. They kept looking around the town, convinced that there was no danger on this planet, or unexpectedly. Every reading back, according to their theory, nothing in this posed even the slightest challenge to the power of Earth. The Galactic Empire was a non-issue right before their conclusion, according to their survey. One of the scouts observed something on his scanner's edge. A lone figure waited in a dusty garage. A human operating a corroded ancient machine appeared to be repairing a truck. It appeared that the man was engrossed on his task without realizing the scout's instruments of presence, dangled from his hands and belt, were occupied beneath the hood, checking parts and adjusting bolts with a straightforward, assured rhythm. The scout stopped momentarily, intrigued by They set up his scanner to focus on the human's actions that he observed were a man employing simple hand gestures, is nearly comical. The extraterrestrial took note of each tool on the human belt, and within the ancient metal box with pliers, screwdrivers, and wrenches. Close by, no electronic gadget at all, without an energy field adjustment. The digital reading simply basic metal tools of the same type. Ions had been abandoned by their culture. The scout shook his head a moment ago. Incredibly, he told his teammates, they continue to use hand tools. Sent the picture back to The command ship observed that people were as far behind as the assessments had indicated. In fact, implied that the aliens kept observing, amused by the man's systematic motions that appeared to them as though they were viewing a primitive ritual. The person wiped them, tightened bolts, disassembled components, and examined every segment of the engine with caution and accuracy. One scout by hand arched an eyebrow as he saw how people go about their "I'll give them that," he said persistently, hardly concealing his amusement. But think the time they squander on every assignment. If he could have accomplished all of that. If our tech had with one gadget in a matter of seconds. Another scout laughed like she was watching history of their technologies. Something from the old records. No. Efficiency. Simply brute. In order to survey, force the human to stand back. He leaned over his desk, wiping his forehead. And to hear him turn on the engine. When it roared to life, I smiled. Scouts looked at each other politely, impressed by his contentment. But mostly, I don't understand how someone could be proud. Using such rudimentary techniques, they had long rejected Earth as a small player in just this scene, and the universe strengthened their negative perception as they collected the final bits of information. An alert appeared on one of their displayed a message from their gadgets. Command Center, asking for a revision to the Scout, promptly shared his findings. Low-level threat detection was found to be absent. Strong reliance on human labor in technology labor. In technology labor, zero automated procedures in Earth's observed regions are considered primitive. Level. The transmission shut off, and the aliens gave the human one last glance. As he stood there, he patted at the truck's hood as though it were some fantastic accomplishment. He packed his tools, each item back into his metal box, rubbing up against the other scouts. Grinned, certain that they had witnessed everything. They required the mechanic to be ignorant of the secret watchers, unlocked his toolbox, and started working on an outdated batter truck. His tools, parked in his garage, were worn out. After years of use, every component of evidence of hundreds of fixes and several hours of work with hesitation, he reached for a wrench. He shifted, feeling the familiar weight in his hand, using consistent practice movements as though only he, led by an unseen rhythm, could hear every change at every stage. The aliens had a purpose for the bolt. Observed their sudden attention peaked as he addressed the truck's issues. Used solely hand tools to do it looked almost ritualistic in the manner in which he operated without the use of digital interface faces, utilizing only basic hand power gadgets. They watched as he carefully adjusted belts, tightened bolts, and carefully inspected each component. Focus with just his senses in the machines in their planet would have scanned, automatically identified, and fixed the notion of someone depending only on their hands and expertise, or something I cannot imagine. A single alien focused the mechanic's toolbox scanner, examining the data feeds. Contents: wrenches, pliers, and screwdrivers are listed. These tools are both manual and primitive, need to exert direct physical effort at every turn. Of the wrench requiring power and the Scout's accuracy from the user was amused, even confused, and their sophisticated such tools had not been necessary for society. Ian's machines completed all of the work. Technology reacted to ideas that the mechanic's techniques seemed to be remnants of a forgotten period, as though they were observing a person attempt to start a fire when the mechanic leaned into it, with sticks his hands turned into the truck's engine. Oil and grease. Stained. It was a sloppy, rough procedure, yet he didn't appear to keep in mind that he worked intently. That resulted from his years of practice eyes that are focused and alert at every turn and rotate his fingers to fit the felt. Recognized every component. There was an unquestionably he moves with precision. Silent mastery that caused the extraterrestrials to halt and pay closer attention. They observed how he tested and felt with his hands for loose parts, while paying close attention to the engine's noises without any outside markers or diagnostics. He merely used his senses to the aliens with gadgets. For everything, this procedure appeared ineffective and untrustworthy. They were unable to comprehend how he was able to identify the issue without sophisticated sensors that don't transmit data a screen. But while he was still working, they started to observe the outcomes of his proficiency, seemed to be revealed by his touch. Unseen problems and answers. One scout examined what he did, captivated by the difference between their technology and his method of working with the mechanic. Didn't have to hurry or require immediate. Each step solutions were measured using each instrument is used specifically for its changed the timing belt for a reason. Checked and tightened a few bolts on the relationships, utilizing simply the information after years of labor. He acquired a technique in his motions, a talent that required neither artificial intelligence nor machines to fix mistakes. It was just the knowledge of someone who was aware of his equipment and his trade. While he worked, the mechanic felt for his wrench, the handle's comfortable grip, something that the aliens were unable to fully recognize, that the instruments in their world were simple machines that are operated either remotely or with sophisticated control interfaces. This instrument was a reliable extension of the human hand metal fragment. That had been fixed. There was no question about the innumerable devices. Then merely employing a tool. It was being aware that tools' peculiarities and strengths, and using each instrument within its limitations, each a distinct personality, and he made advantage of them. Similar to a musician, when plays the scouts silently observed their first laughter giving birth to another emotion, hazy understanding that this mechanic talent transcended the simplicity of his instruments. His patience and accuracy were thoughtful, even elegant. He understood what he was doing, and he was independent of their technology to address the issue. But it wasn't a lack of competence or intelligence. It was just a different strategy, one that necessary motor ability and a relationship to the actual work that the technician produced last tweaks and testing of his fingers, each bolt's tightness, guaranteeing everything, even the vehicles, was in its proper position. Engine started to run smoothly beneath his hand, a sound he was familiar with, and the aliens were grateful that it was simply sounds. Yet it was reassuring to him that he did a good job. They kept examining the site, but no, regardless of how much information they collected, they couldn't measure his level of competence. The information was ingrained throughout years of encounter without any kind of visual screen or gadget. This was something their technology wasn't able to duplicate. Their global proficiency was assessed using the complexity of the instruments, employed the ease with which the duties were finished. They were starting to notice that advanced knowledge wasn't always necessary for expertise. Systems. It was an odd sensation, understanding that this rudimentary human had learned his trade in a manner that they couldn't completely understand. Therefore, they rejected, although his work is inferior to that of a relic, was exact and everything but irresponsible, resourceful and committed despite not having the convenience of cutting-edge technology, as he returned his tools to their respective boxes. Fragment coming together with the scouts heard a pleasing sound and surprising level of deference. They'd believed that, in the absence of their advanced gadgets, he would be lost, but he was completing tasks they were unable to complete, issues they wouldn't understand how to approach without their technology. While the scouts persisted in their looking at one of their gadgets, abruptly sent out a stern warning to the team leader, examine the signal, and was quite aback to discover alert pointing to a crucial. Their cloaking shield is malfunctioning. The system that was concealing them was overheating, was the device's failure, gently igniting something they hadn't previously encountered on any mission. They briefly exchanged glances and looked confident. When shaken normally, these issues would be fixed by their automated repair components. But nothing was working as anticipated. That the lead scout would try to bypass the mechanism that directs energy to restore the interface, but not the cloak, showed mistakes in a short amount of time. Succession's refusal to comply. They looked for any nearby technological devices that could only help them by reminding them of the primeval state of Earth is far away. Infrastructure was comparable to requirements needed to fix them. Despite their substantial training, scouts were left stranded without the sophisticated instruments they would eventually rely on. Frustrated, one of them muttered. Recognizing that their only option was to look in order to assist, their scanners locked on the mechanic is still working close by on his truck, who is totally ignorant of their presence. The notion of going up to him was unpleasant, to put it mildly, but there reluctantly. The possibilities were limited. Scout deactivated the rest of the shield and moved forward to indicate his group to follow. They made their way to the carefully handled their advanced forms. He could now see the technician looking raised his face, showing interest, but not frightened of the scouts due to his composed manner. Was Lexing shocked, as they had anticipated, or at Scout took the lead with the least amount of hesitancy? The broken gadget making a gesture with a kind of uncomfortable deference, indicating that they required help without saying a word. The mechanic examined the apparatus, studying it while flipping it over in his hands. The extraterrestrial with a seasoned eye. Team saw as he started testing its weight, searching for potential sites of. He didn't flinch at the odd repair, materials, or a novel design. He assessed it just like he would any other machine, looking for a workable solution. One scout, still apprehensive, tried to warn regarding the intricacy of the device, describing how it used energy to function, fields that are well beyond his comprehension. The mechanic listened for a moment before continuing. His analysis without any indication of he opened his toolbox in intimidation. Grabbing his wrenches and other tools, the site's basic tools for the aliens were both amusing and uneasy. They couldn't imagine how these hand tools might be able to resolve the problems their equipment encountered. But the mechanic remained unfazed, began evaluating every component of the gadget. As he operated the scouts, become increasingly aware of vulnerability while inactive and incapable to help. They lacked technical expertise for these activities on their own civilization had long since progressed beyond such practical repair work. For each modification to them, the mechanic's actions appeared arbitrary, not having the anticipation they had. But he moved forward with composure. Sometimes he mutters to himself, carefully examining each element in his hands, moved steadily under intuition's guidance and expertise as opposed to automated prompts or pre-programmed guidelines. The gadget that had been igniting began to stabilize sporadically. With his modifications, the mechanic observed an internal wiring mismatch and realigned it carefully with the tip of then he replaced a loose screwdriver connection. Using a temporary fix, putting a little metal brace in place, it was an unconventional patching job. Standard, however, the device operated stopped the power flow from becoming too hot. The aliens exchanged before things returned to normal. Uncomfortable looks that couldn't ignore the effectiveness of his makeshift fix. At last, one of the scouts said something, expressing astonishment at his method had worked the mechanic in reality, shrugged and clarified in plain language that each machine had flaws, and that simple solutions can occasionally outlast the most cutting-edge solutions. For his casual, they were confident. Digesting issues in their world alone, the newest technologies was taken into account, effective, and anything less was thrown away as outdated. They discovered a man using what they have to do, the impossible thought to be impolite tactics. The lead scout examined his device's readings. Verification of the power levels as things were stable. They could start there currently, but he hesitated the cloaking sequence. Seeing the mechanic's efforts had questioned his beliefs regarding Earth's technology and its inhabitants, rejected people as technologically rudimentary. Yet this individual had made a none of them were able to fix his unquestionably. The skill stemmed from a location that went beyond simply machinery. It was ingrained in years of experience, a level of realizing that they hadn't taken the mechanic handed the device, which was valuable. Back nodding as though to convey that the work was completed. The aliens agreed to a combination of relief as well as confusion in their statements that the lead scout was unable to avoid hesitantly asking him why. He made the effort to acquire these abilities while repairs could be handled by machines much more easily. The mechanic laughed efficiently, describing how occasionally machines break down in unexpected ways. For technology, he appreciated understanding how things operated, because he gained control thanks to that information. He wouldn't exchange it for anything. As the scouts got ready to go, they looked at one another and realized they have gained knowledge from this meeting. They had anticipated when they arrived here to witness a species that is mired in the past, but rather they saw their own potential. This was overshadowed by technology, the mechanic's method of holding simplicity, a capacity for flexibility and resilience that had not come across in their own. They had been humbled in a civilization that by a person who didn't require their technology to comprehend the mechanic's set of repair principles to perform maintenance on the alien device, using and focus without faltering, his hands moving in steady, purposeful movements. He evaluated the unknown machine with assurance created after years of exposure to every kinds of equipment and engines, regardless of how unfamiliar or complicated he was. Unable to ascertain the details of its internal workings, he was enough aware of to identify any universal indicators of loose heat misalignment and malfunction connections. When he examined the gadget, he isolated the regions that could lead to difficulty, ignoring the extraterrestrial building and having faith in the concepts. He depended on the scouts for his entire life. Seen with a combination of distrust and inquiry, I'm not sure how his manual method works. Potentially produce outcomes. They took note of every tool. He used to perceive nothing advanced in his strategies, but the mechanics appeared unfazed. He looked over the parts. With mental practice, precision dissecting every segment and allocating a goal based on his observations, and feel as like there is nothing advanced. He had his senses and instruments, inclinations that depend on the texture of the sound, with faint indications of wear one area, displayed indications of misalignment, overheating, and he promptly found a weak connection that's probably the electrical short. With a little, he tightened the joint with a screwdriver, incorporating a little metal brace from his tools to strengthen the framework of his each movement was precise and effective. He made a conscious change and didn't squander any after second. Guessing himself, he trusted his hands. Each swift yet deliberate motion creates solutions as he was working. When he sensed the part stable, he proceeded without hesitancy. The mechanic's comprehension was founded on simplicity, refined by years of putting up with uncooperative equipment and figuring out solutions with little resources. He didn't question the value of his techniques. He was aware of his objective was to make sure each component functioned as near to its intended purpose as effectively as feasible. By using fundamental instruments to bring stability back where, for him, sophisticated systems had failed, the solution didn't call for complex technologies. It called for insight, flexibility, and a readiness to work with whatever was accessible. He carefully looked at each part, rapidly identifying another possible where energy flows at the point of failure was interrupted by a broken wire, that he removed the wire's end with firm hands, bending it to form a sturdy connection, holding it in place with a little problems were resolved in his universe, offering workable solutions without the requirement for immaculate or faultless material circumstances to him. A repair was roughly getting things to function, rather than creating them. This idea pretty much dictated all he did. Move each answer in a straightforward but efficient manner. When he finished connecting, he modified a tiny relay as an additional component. That didn't seem to fit with merely he replaced it with a few taps of his wrench. Visually inspect each component to make sure it could manage the flow of energy. The aliens observed intently, starting to see a trend in his methodology even though it went against everything they understood of efficiency, on which his procedure was basics based on fundamental ideas instead of the intricate computations. Every step was required by their own. Technology was a component of an unwritten custom that relied on experience and trial instinct. The gadget started displaying indications of stabilization, of the issue of overheating significantly diminished to the scouts nevertheless. The mechanical approach appeared to work, returning the gadget to operational state without any advanced technology support. His simple instruments, such as pliers and a wrench, a screwdriver, was fully utilized, each one quietly fulfilling its function. Dependability. He had implemented solutions based on comprehension as opposed to computerized diagnostics that modify each component to fulfill its intended purpose. The mechanic quickly examined his work to make sure each link remained solid. Each component was safe, and the gadget answered without making any mistakes. He wasn't worried about the machine's his job's design or intended purpose was only to get it to work. It didn't, regardless of how sophisticated the materials were or how intricate the design is. His method depended on solving problems in a realistic way and creative thinking. By tackling the basic problems, he was able to stabilize a gadget that none of the extraterrestrials could. He gave over the completed repairs. The gadget back with a straightforward nod of completion. The gadget had been brought back to life through a number of minor useful modifications made at each stage using logic he had learned by experience. He comes from a culture where simplicity was a strength, which he had used. From philosophy to a technological device he never seen before, figuring it out aptitude and foresight as he packed away his instruments. The apparatus now functioned without error, demonstrating his flexibility in being aware of. The scouts examined the information and verified that the gadget was now completely stable and functional in spite of their reservations. that the mechanic's approach had been successful where his instruments had failed, despite their own efforts. Despite being straightforward, they had accomplished his solutions for what technology couldn't. Despite the fact that BASIC has brought stability to the mechanic, made a straightforward fix, issue to resolve and a task to do. But for the aliens, it was more of a reminder that technology wasn't the only thing that established a civilization high-level skill resilience, and being resourceful was just as important as the mechanic delivered the machine to the machine. Returning to the aliens with his assignment finished without fanfare, he thought it was simply one more patch, one more day of labor. But the scouts examined the fixed gadget with a fresh perspective that they had shown up with faith in their own advanced technology, ensures that Earth's no one could ever equal the strength and effectiveness of their sophisticated systems. But a man was standing here with just a few basic tools were functional again. To a gadget that they were unable to fix, this mechanic had altered themselves. Something essential in their viewpoint. The lead scout looked at the gadget doing a last diagnostic check. Every system displayed operating status. The flow of energy was steady, and the overheating problem had been fixed. Was a sobering insight that the repair simplicity contradicted their presumptions. They had anticipated complexity to respond to complexity. But the hands-on approach of the mechanic has addressed the underlying problems in a manner that hadn't thought that this fix wasn't based on how. Advance the tools. It was the result of creativity and
a comprehension that transcended surface technology. They had to recognize that simple solutions could compete with the most cutting-edge systems that the mechanics created. Doubt their own dependence on advanced diagnostics and automation in everything in their universe worked with accuracy in every activity performed by specific systems that needed minimal direct communication. They had been accustomed to relying on technology to resolve every issue immediately without having to comprehend the specifics of every component or mechanism here. But they recognized the value of flexibility as a talent they ignored or took for granted. That the ingenuity of mechanics was not restricted by the lack of sophisticated instruments. Instead, because of the scouts, it thrived. Discovered that although they depended on strict protocols and predetermined systems, this mechanic could be used with any condition, any material by utilizing just the information he had stored in his own memory. Their world was unsettled by thought. Each piece of equipment was created with integrated repair and diagnostics procedures, which make their function one of supervision. As opposed to active participation, they came upon a man who didn't require programmed solutions or comprehensive information streams. He just comprehended the concepts and put them into practice without hesitancy. Their report would have to alteration. They had planned to categorize Earth as a minimal danger in the past civilization constrained by antiquated technology and not able to match the developments of the Galactic Empire. But this encounter had demonstrated to them that the power of technology wasn't limited to it. It was about flexibility with machinery. Resilience and problem-solving skills issues irrespective of the instruments accessible. The mechanical method emphasized a capability of adapt that machines were unable to duplicate, a adaptability in problem-solving and thought-resolving that might be more beneficial than any intricate structure. It was a talent they hadn't appreciated, one that was situated outside their criteria for evaluating technology strength, that they had been concentrating on assessing Earth, using the criteria of their own culture, which they hadn't thought about the potential for various strategies could be equally. The mechanic had proven to be efficient. Knowledge that was not derived from programming a skill hone or manuals by trial and error in their minds, they started to perceive Earth's possibilities in a new way, not as a world without antiquated equipment, but as a location where humans can thrive in any case. Their report would now acknowledge this insight by reflecting that so-called primordial Earth technology hid a degree of expertise. They appeared to be capable of being formidable. Returning to the mechanic, who was previously packing away his equipment and cleaning his kit, didn't think twice about it. Was merely another task completed, yet to them it was an experience where they were able to had undervalued what this experience showed the boundaries of their own evaluation system that gave priority to technology improvement over the human element. They had failed to recognize the importance of creativity, qualities of perseverance and resolve that was not reproducible by machines. Regardless of how well prepared they were, to scout left the lead and started drafting the according to a new assessment. Earth's people may not complex systems, however. They had a strength that the seldom did the Galactic Empire observe, that humanity have an ability to solve problems for job with the resources and circumstances at hand, instead of depending on perfection and accuracy. That this mechanic embodied a silent force that went beyond technology was an asset that didn't require the newest technology to accomplish its objectives. This encounter served as a kind of reminder that even the most basic abilities could surpass the most sophisticated methods. When used with comprehension and patience, the scouts' perception of Earth changed. They had arrived anticipating seeing a backwards, but they were heading out. With a renewed regard for its citizens, they were aware of that actual capacity wasn't restricted to the instruments, that its possession by civilization was characterized by the flexibility and durability of its people who used the mechanical method wasn't an exception, rather. It was a revelation about the characteristics of human ingenuity, resourcefulness, capable of adjusting to any difficulty as the mechanic proceeded with his habits. The scouts discovered that he represented a lesson that they hadn't predicted, that Earth's inhabitants might not possess the same level of technology as they, however, they possessed something that was perhaps the ability to discover a way is more valuable. Regardless of the restrictions, this knowledge would be reflected in the report, suggesting that the Galactic Empire come closer Earth cautiously, not due to its technology, but due to the spirit that gave it power without any formalities. The scouts left with a renewed sense of respect for the Earth's inhabitants and peace regarding their trade. They admitted that this mechanic had made an impression. They would remember their journey for a long time. The back would have a deeper recognizing the fact that being strong wasn't always about at times. Sophistication was about being prepared to get your hands filthy and take the necessary steps to resolve the issue.